They muted me mid-sentence. Not in some metaphorical, they didn't listen kind of way. I mean, literally during a Zoom call with the entire board of directors. Right as I said, Blake, that's not true. I have the real num. The screen flashed red and poof. My mic was silenced like I was a malfunctioning PowerPoint slide. Click, gone. 15 years of breaking my back for that company, and I got cut off like a bad podcast guest. But let me back up, because this didn't start with the mute button. It started with a compliment that smelled like hairspray and condescension. Blake, our new Chief Innovation Officer, 34 years old, jawline like a geometry problem, charisma thick enough to coat a donut, leaned over my cubicle wall on his third day and said, Margaret, you've got such dependable energy, like an old Honda, always running. Then he winked. I should have known right then. I've been at that company since Obama's first term. I've survived 5 CEOs, 2 failed acquisitions, and one very regrettable holiday party where I witnessed my boss cry into a shrimp cocktail. I know how to keep my head down, deliver clean budget reports, and avoid saying anything quotable in Slack. I'm not flashy. I don't ideate or synergize. I do the work. I run a department that nobody notices unless it's on fire, which is exactly how I like it. And maybe that's why Blake underestimated me. Before we dive deeper into the corporate circus of bad bod and cook numbers, let me ask you this. If you're listening to this and you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? I mean, really, 97% of y'all are out here binging Betrayal like it's a Netflix doc and haven't clicked that little button. Smash the like, hit subscribe. It's free. It keeps the team caffeinated enough to keep telling these beautiful train wrecks of late-stage capitalism. Back to the regularly scheduled implosion. So, Blake saunters in, fresh from some startup he torched in San Francisco, and immediately starts tossing around buzzwords like confetti at a marketing orgy. Disruption, scalability, Project Chimera. That last one was a crown jewel. Some AI-adjacent mystery product that was going to revolutionize personalized automation. No one knew what it actually did, but it had a logo, a countdown clock, and a promo video with slow-motion stock footage of people high-fiving near servers. Real cutting-edge stuff. My job was to make the numbers line up behind the curtain while the magicians waved their hands. Fine, I'd done worse. But during one of Blake's first all-hands meetings, he dropped a slide on user engagement that made me do a double take. User retention has increased 67% quarter over quarter, it read in bold blue Comic Sans, because apparently professionalism died with the office dress code. I stared at that number, chewing my pen like it owed me money. Because here's the thing, we didn't have that many users. Hell, we didn't even have the infrastructure to track retention that precisely. That stat had come from somewhere between Blake's imagination and whatever pitch deck he'd been snorting for breakfast. But I said nothing, not in front of the team. Not yet. I told myself it was just sales fluff, harmless inflation, a little ego air in the balloon. Happens all the time. But then, over the next few weeks, the fluff started to feel engineered. R&D budgets got squeezed in favor of market readiness initiatives. Everyone suddenly cared more about the appearance of success than the substance. And Blake, he'd stroll into meetings late, call me mags, and toss out phrases like, let's be brave about our metrics, which is executive speak for lie better. Still, I stayed in my lane. Queen of my cubicle castle. A little tired, a little bitter, but proud. Like a vintage thermos, dinged up, but still keeping things hot. I'd given this company my weekends, my patience, most of my neck mobility. I wasn't going to jump at shadows. But that engagement slide, that one dumb lie wrapped in charm and PowerPoint transitions, it stuck with me like a popcorn kernel in your teeth. I couldn't let it go, not because it was a lie, but because it was so casual, so public, so smug, and something told me it wasn't the last. It came in the form of a calendar invite. Subject line, quick sync, budget alignment, brain light, fire time. 2:15 p.m. attendees, Blake Margaret. Location, Blake's glass wall corner aquarium of ego, also known as Innovation HQ. I brought my laptop and a printed spreadsheet because, unlike Blake, I don't trust wireless connections, Bluetooth keyboards, or men who wear designer sneakers with no socks. He didn't even look up when I walked in, just gestured to the seat across from him with one hand while tapping away at his MacBook like he was composing Beethoven's 10th. "So, Mags," he said finally, flashing me that award-winning LinkedIn smile. "We've been doing some thinking about Chimera's pre-launch momentum. The board's hot on optics. We need sizzle, something we can flaunt to the street." I blinked. "We're already allocating over $7 million to media. You want more?" "Not more money," he said, leaning forward like he was about to sell me a timeshare. "Just a little creative reallocation. Move some of that sluggish R&D spend into marketing. Give Chimera a stronger top-line glow." I stared at him. "You want me to reclassify engineering costs as advertising?" "Think of it as reframing," he said, tone light as Splenda. "Same pie, just slicing it for the right audience. That's not how pies work." He chuckled. "Come on, Margaret. You're a survivor. Know how this game is played." And there it was, that glint, not the frat boy charm he wore for all hands meetings. Something colder. A flicker of teeth behind the smile. "I can't sign off on that," I said, my voice level. "We have audit trails, reporting standards." Blake's expression didn't change, but his energy shifted like a sudden drop in barometric pressure. "Of course, I'd never ask you to do anything you're uncomfortable with." Then, just as I reached to close my laptop, he added, "But I will say, it's important we all show we're team players, especially with the board watching. It would be a shame if certain departments looked inflexible during such a pivotal moment." He let that sentence hang in the air like spoiled cologne. I left the meeting with my knuckles white and my jaw tight enough to crack walnuts. Back at my desk, I pulled up the budget history and stared at the blinking cursor for 10 solid minutes. The spreadsheet looked normal, clean, boring even, but it was wrong now. Tainted. And I knew if I made that adjustment, just dragged a couple of rows from column C to column F, I'd be crossing a line I couldn't walk back over. Not just ethically, personally. Because here's the thing no one tells you about being the responsible one for 15 years. Eventually, someone tries to bury their mess under your reputation. And suddenly, the little things started piling up like snow on a weak roof. A Slack ping from Chad, the junior finance associate Blake had recently promoted, asking me to pre-approve next quarter projected returns before we even finalized actuals. An email thread mysteriously missing from my inbox, but still visible in Blake's shared calendar. A dinner reservation on the company card labeled vendor relations that matched the name of Blake's personal trainer. I wasn't just paranoid. I was being softened, prepped, seasoned like a steak about to hit the grill. And Blake, he was holding the tongs. I stopped sleeping, not in the poetic tragic heroine sense. I mean literally. I'd sit in bed at 2:43 a.m., laptop glowing like an interrogation lamp, scrolling through quarterly ledgers with a growing sense of dread curdling in my gut like expired yogurt. My cat, Pickle, started sighing at me like I was the one losing it. Maybe I was, but once you see the rot, you can't just unsee it. That creative reallocation request was a pull on a thread I didn't even know existed. And what unraveled underneath wasn't just one bad budget line. It was a tapestry of deceit. It started with the Q2 ledger from last year. For Blake, everything was boring, predictable budgets that made sense, departments that spent what they had, no mystery line items, no sudden dips and bumps. Then Q3 hit, Blake's first quarter, and suddenly there were shadows in the numbers. Tiny things at first. A $12,000 consulting invoice charged to DevOps, but a vendor name didn't match anyone in our contractor system. A $4,500 marketing retainer paid to a Shell LLC registered in Delaware. Standard enough, unless you notice that same LLC was used 3 times across different departments, always for round numbers, always on Fridays. It was like following footprints in the snow. You might miss one, but eventually the pattern stares back. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. I just knew it wasn't right, and no one else seemed to be looking. I built a file encrypted, local only, on a personal thumb drive. I kept taped inside an empty Altoids tin labeled expired passwords. I titled it The Blake Project, mostly as a joke to myself because I needed to laugh at least once during that week, or I was going to start crying into the copier tray. Inside it, I started documenting not just suspicious entries, but everything: Blake's emails, calendar discrepancies, expense reports, off communications, Slack threads that smelled off. I didn't just become a spreadsheet analyst. I became a historian of deceit. Every click of the keyboard felt like striking a match. And God help me, I felt alive. There was something intoxicating about it. Not joyful exactly, but necessary. Like scratching an itch you've ignored for years and finally letting yourself feel the sting. The rage I'd buried under decades of office diplomacy started to simmer. Every "Hey Mags" email, every time Blake called my diligence old school, every junior associate who looked at me like I was their goddamn lunch lady. It all started boiling. I kept telling myself I was just being thorough, just safeguarding the company, just making sure that if anything ever exploded, I'd have receipts. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just watching anymore. I was hunting. It started with a password reset I didn't request. I was trying to access the Q1 vendor audit folder when the system kicked me out mid-scroll, blinking up some cheery error message about access restrictions due to department realignment. Realignment? My ass. I'd had clearance of that folder since before Chad was shaving. Speaking of Chad, the human equivalent of a thumb drive full of viruses had suddenly developed a fascination with my inbox. Every email I sent, there he was, CC like a barnacle on a speedboat, asking questions I didn't ask, sending notes I didn't need. He even replied once to a thread about printer toner with "Great initiative, Margaret," like he was patting me on the head. I forwarded that one to myself. Subject line: Exhibit B, Chad the cheerleader. Things escalated in that slippery corporate way. So gradually you question your own paranoia. Deadlines got moved without notice. My meeting invites vanished, only to be resent 2 minutes before start time. Chad started showing up to my one-on-ones with Blake, uninvited, acting like he was there to take notes, more like sniffing the air and reporting back what I was thinking. That's when I started taking my lunch late, not to eat, but to walk the halls quietly, observe who was talking to whom, listen to whispered words and sighs in break rooms. The office felt different, tighter, eyes everywhere, but no one really looking except Brenda. Brenda from accounting was a living fossil in orthopedic clogs. 42 years in the company, counting down her last fiscal quarter like it was parole. She wore glasses with lenses thick enough to refract office gossip. No one really talked to Brenda, mostly because her conversational style was, let's say, apocalyptic. "Got your umbrella?" she said one Monday as I passed her desk. "Forecast says debris." I paused. "You mean rain?" She just tapped a yellow post-it on her monitor and whispered, "Storm's coming, sweetheart." And that's how it began. Every few days, I'd walk past her office, and like clockwork, her screen would just happen to be open to a spreadsheet she shouldn't have had, displaying totals that didn't match the master file, a trail of ghost vendors, duplicate expense line items. One time, I spotted a billing code labeled "Indisp Exec Channel," internal displacement. The hell did that even mean? I never asked. Brendan never explained. But then, one Thursday afternoon, she handed me a manila envelope. No words. Just plopped it on my desk while I was mid-call with procurement. Inside, a thumb drive labeled "Family Photos, Brenda's grandbaby's frog face." When I looked up, she was gone like a budgetary Batman. It was the most thrilling moment I'd had since 2016. I couldn't plug it in at work, obviously. Slipped it into my purse like it was plutonium. That night, back home, with the blinds drawn and Pickle asleep in a pile of unfolded laundry, I decrypted it like it was national security. It wasn't just vendor invoices. It was a full pre-acquisition review packet, drafted and signed uncirculated, from Blake's previous company, the one that had gone belly up a year before he joined ours. And in it, a nearly identical pattern of fraud. Duplicate charges, classified budgets. One junior executive listed as the primary operator on every questionable transaction. Someone Blake threw under the bus once already. And now, he was paving the road to do it again, this time with my name on the tire tracks. I sat back in my chair, heart thumping like a bass drum in a funeral procession. Outside, someone was walking their dog. A normal night in a normal neighborhood. But in my living room, I had just crossed the line from watching this man ruin lives to planning how to stop him. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. I was pissed. There was right between a folder named Brenda Grandkids Summer 2021 and one called Fraud Jokes for Kids. A single PDF file titled Due Diligence Unredacted Final PDF. I double-clicked it, expecting some benign legacy doc, maybe something half-baked from an old acquisition. What loaded wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a confession in spreadsheet drag, a corporate autopsy report 72 pages long. Timestamps, vendor codes, budget line items, expense reports. The one that quietly collapsed last year under market conditions just weeks after he landed at ours with suspiciously glowing resume and a golden parachute that smelled like burner phones and dry clean alibis. I swear to God, page 12 hit like a shovel to the chest. It outlined recurring pattern. R&D expenses were routed into user acquisition to inflate pre-launch valuation. Bonuses tied to quarterly growth benchmarks based on internal KPIs, ones that were never audited. Vendor contracts duplicated with shell LLCs to siphon capital off balance sheets. A paper trail so perfectly crooked it looped back on itself like a cursed figure eight. And the worst part, every falsified entry was authorized on paper by a junior exec named Tessa Doyle. Age 29, 6 months into her first leadership role, fired without severance, and currently managing a bookstore in rural Oregon. If LinkedIn is to be believed, they'd fed her the numbers, coached her on how to optimize reporting, then tossed her under compliance bust the moment things unraveled. I sat there, palms sweaty on the keyboard, cold fluorescent light flickering above me like a dying truth bulb. There was no more speculation, no more piecing things together. I knew the playbook now, and I was next because Project Chimera wasn't real. Not really. Oh, there was a prototype. Sure, some Frankenstein API held together with bubblegum and NDAs. But the real product was illusion. The perception of breakthrough hype for investors, AI-powered nothing with an ad budget larger than its codebase, built to go viral, spike valuation, trigger exec bonuses, and then quietly fail to scale 6 months post-launch while the C-suite cashed out, and I was the last name on the launch documents. The final sign-off, the patsy. I closed the laptop and sat perfectly still, the room silent except for Pickle's gentle snoring and the hum of the old fridge that came with the townhouse. Ever feel your spine go cold, like your body's decided to freeze frame before your life splits in half? I didn't cry. I didn't rage. That came later. Right then, what I felt was clarity. I saw every piece on the board, every lie, every bonus clause, every trap. The meetings, the access blocks, the team player comments, Chad's presence, Blake's smiling threats. All of it. They weren't ignoring me. They were framing me. And I wasn't going to let it happen. That night, I created a new folder on my encrypted drive. Title, Containment Plan. Inside it, I started outlining timelines, collecting screenshots, tracking audit logs. I built a cross-reference of every shell vendor Blake used at Invigiotech and compared with our own current records. There were matches, too many matches. This wasn't a rogue exec cutting corners. This was a method, a system designed to turn 2 p.m. subject lines screaming like a siren. Urgent Project Chimera leadership, discussion, executive review, attendance required. Scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp the next morning. No agenda. No context, just a quiet bullet with my name on it. I sat there for a long minute, staring at the screen like it might apologize. I knew what this was. The walls had closed in. Blake had sniffed the smoke. Maybe Chad saw me copy one too many files. Maybe Brenda's accidents weren't as invisible as we hoped. Doesn't matter. This was it. The public guillotine. And here's the thing. I didn't panic. I didn't scream or cry or call HR because I knew they'd already written the ending. Blake would play the benevolent hatchet man, and I'd be tossed into corporate abyss with a severance package that smelled like guilt and non-disclosure. So I did what any woman backed into a corner by frat boy Machiavellis would do. I sharpened my knives. I opened a clean document and began drafting a LinkedIn post. Not some pity me novella. No, this was surgical. A ticking bomb wrapped in civility, soaked in gasoline. I wrote about my 15 years of service. Detailed Blake's creative reallocations, the spreadsheet shell games, the ghost vendors, the bonuses tied to numbers no one dared audit. And I attached proof. Screenshots, code snippets, vendor IDs. Every fact was double-sourced. Every accusation wrapped in the warm, soft tone of concerned leadership reflection. I scheduled the post for 9:04 a.m. Then I compiled the full dossier. The Blake Project, containment plan, the Invisio-Tech postmortem, and its artifacts, even the metadata trails showing which accounts had approved the redirection. It was 312 megabytes of very polite thermonuclear war. I drafted an email to 6 journalists. 2 were known for their deep dives into corporate fraud. 1 had written a profile on Blake's rise to disruptor stardom. The others were financial desk hounds who live for SEC whisper leaks. I scheduled the email to send at 9:05 a.m. The subject line, Project Chimera, you're going to want this. I unplugged the thumb drive, deleted every trace from my laptop, and microwaved the Altoids tin. It sparked like hell and made pickle run under the couch. But hey, symbolism matters. Then I poured myself a glass of wine. Cheap stuff, screw cap, but it tasted like power. I sat on the couch and stared into nothing. Not mourning, not really. It was more like stillness, like the silence before controlled demolition. I'd loved that company once. I'd built budgets like blueprints, protected junior staff from idiotic VP decisions, stayed late without ever asking for applause. I was a steward, a lifer, and now I was a loose end on Blake's PowerPoint. Fine. If they wanted to end my story, I'd write my own epilogue. And I'd make sure everyone in the building heard it echo. Scorched earth. Damn right. But this time, fire wasn't for revenge. It was for truth. 9 a.m. sharp. I clicked join meeting with a steady hand and dead eyes. The little Zoom lobby spun for a beat, then popped me into the digital war room. 11 little squares lined the top row like executioners waiting their turn. Board members, the CFO, 2 faces I didn't recognize but immediately hated. Chad was there, smirking like a possum in a Patagonia vest. And then, of course, there was Blake, smiling like he'd already eaten the meal and was licking his damn fingers. Margaret, he beamed, so glad you could join. We were just singing your praises. 15 years, right? That's rare these days. Real corporate stamina. I muted the acid building in my throat and nodded politely. The CFO chimed in. Yes, thank you, Margaret. Before we dive into the agenda, we do want to acknowledge your long-standing dedication. Blake tells us you've been instrumental in the Chimera rollout. That was the preamble, the backpack before the backstab. Blake cleared his throat. And unfortunately, with every great project, there are course corrections after some recent audits. Internal ones, mind you. We've identified some discrepancies that we believe originated from oversight and budget realignments within the Chimera division. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just watched. He pulled up a screen share like he was unveiling a family heirloom. A series of doctor spreadsheets appeared. Numbers I never signed off on. Line items realigned in ways I'd explicitly refused to approve. He spoke slowly, condescendingly, like he was narrating a bedtime story about my own execution. These reallocations, he said, clicking through falsified invoices, led to inflated pre-launch projections. We don't believe this was malicious, but the responsibility unfortunately falls under Margaret's purview. And there it was, the trap fully sprung. He turned to me with the gentle brutality of a dentist about to pull a tooth. Margaret, if there's anything you'd like to say before we bring this to vote. I leaned forward, calm, unbothered, like a statue built from coffee and suppressed rage. Yes, I said, clear and firm. Blake, that's not true. I have the real numbers right. He clicked, muted. I watched my own mouth stop moving. Watched the red microphone icon glow like a branding iron. Watched Blake nod solemnly like a priest about to bless the ashes. I'm sorry, he said, addressing the group. I didn't want this to be contentious. We'll follow up with formal HR procedures, of course. The CFO frowned slightly, confused, but not enough to care. Chad stared at the ceiling like He was waiting for the applause sign to light up. I sat there, still as winter, because they didn't know what time it was. 9:04 a.m. And in another tab, unseen, unsilenced, my voice had just gone live to the world. My frozen face stared back from a muted Zoom square, lips midward, eyes like twin scalpels, jaw clenched tight enough to bend spoons. Blake kept talking, voice syrupy and falsely regretful, playing the martyr. It's unfortunate when longtime team members resist change, but leadership requires hard decisions. He clicked to the next slide like he was teaching a masterclass in betrayal. They thought it was over. They thought I was done. But at that exact second, to the millisecond, my post went live. Not a rant, not a messy breakdown. A precise, sharp-edged expose wrapped in the clean, polite packaging of corporate sincerity. The title read, On Integrity, Data, and the Cost of Silence. The body opened with a warm thank you to the company for a decade and a half of challenges and growth, then pivoted into what I called concerns I can no longer withhold in good conscience. What followed was pure voltage. Screenshots of internal budget manipulation, audit log with timestamps, vendor contracts that match Shell LLC's Blake used at Envisio Tech, excerpts from the due diligence report Brenda had slipped me like a grenade disguised as a baby photo collection. Evidence, line by line, click by click. My phone, silent until now, exploded. One vibration, then three, then a continuous buzz like a wasp nest caught fire. I didn't even look at it. I looked at my second monitor, pulled up the livestock tracker, ticker symbol, CHRM. First tick, flat. Second tick, down 2.3%. Next tick, minus 5.7%. Refresh, 8.9%. By the time Blake clicked into his fake Q&A slide, it was double digits. Across my feed, the post was being shared, first by a former engineer, then a former product manager, then someone from HR who added, I always wondered what happened to Tessa Doyle. The comments were a wildfire. Can confirm everything she said. I worked under Blake. He tried this in Envisio too. SEC about to have a field day. I've been in that room. I know that spreadsheet. Then the journalists kicked in. One retweeted with the caption, This is the most detailed corporate whistleblowing I've ever seen. Names, files, receipts, popcorn time. Back on Zoom, the first sign of panic was subtle. The CFO looking down at his phone, frowning. Then another director tapped something on their tablet, eyes widening. Then Blake's audio stuttered. And moving forward, we'll, make sure there's full transpar, he froze. Not technically, physically. Chad leaned in, whispering something just off mic. Blake's face drained like bad toner in a jam printer. I unmuted myself. Yeah, unmuted. Someone had panicked and hit the wrong button. Or maybe Zoom, like the gods, has a sense of humor. Check LinkedIn. I said, my voice steady, acid-wrapped steel. And maybe keep an eye on your stock ticker. Got about 20 minutes before CNBC calls. I clicked mute again. My choice this time. Then, just as Blake opened his mouth, I clicked leave meeting. Let them scramble. Let them stew. Because I wasn't just Margaret